Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start out apologizing for my voice. Yesterday I didn't have one, so I'm hoping to make it through today in the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so. I just want to start out with a little bit of my story and how I ended up here and my interest in confidence building for people and horses and in equine behavior, which has changed sort of from my traditional hunter-jumper original training through some natural horsemanship and now into learning more about science-based equine behavior and how all of that is fitting together. So several years ago, on a beautiful summer day, much like today, I was riding my young warm blood 16-3 hand dually. It was a perfect day for riding. Beautiful blue sky, not too hot, and a nice gentle breeze. What could go wrong? I was really looking forward to riding this easygoing horse who I'd started, bred, and raised myself. And as we took a few steps away from the mounting block, suddenly I was on a bucking bronco. And I managed to sit the first 3 of his massive bucks. But then he zigged right and I zagged left and hit the ground hard. Now, I wasn't hurt physically, but my confidence was shattered. And I'd been riding for over 30 years. I was a professional horse trainer and riding coach. So why did this damage my confidence so badly? Well, as I said, I'd raised this horse, I'd bred him, I thought I knew him, and the bucking caught me totally off guard. So I didn't trust myself anymore, because if I couldn't figure out or I hadn't seen this coming, what else might I be missing? So losing my confidence wasn't so much about coming off in that fall. It was about, because, you come off when you ride horses. It's part of the game. It wasn't my first fall, wouldn't be my last, and it hasn't been. So what I needed to do was, first of all, rebuild my confidence, but in order to do that, also understand my horse at a deeper level, and horses generally. And that's how confident horsemanship was born, and that's what I do. So today, what I'm hoping to give you some insight into is to what behavior really is, what causes the horses to do these behaviors that we might not particularly want them to be doing. And that's mostly what I'm going to focus on in this presentation. And what we need to do in order to change or prevent those behaviors from happening in the first place, while building a positive partnership with our horse. So, first of all, let's be clear that what behavior really is, because it's not a label. And how often are people calling their horses, or you hear other people saying about their horses, he's lazy, he's crazy, he's just trying to get the better of me, he's trying to dominate me, he's bossy, he's pushy, she's a witch. Those are labels, and they're full of emotion. They don't define the action, and the behavior is the action. So, my horse stamped his foot. That horse was nudging the owner with his head. That horse bolted forward. There's no emotion attached in that. It's just a description of what's going on. And we need to remove the emotion so that we deal with the behavior rather than reacting ourselves based on how our horse is reacting. So, behavior is communication. It's one thing. It's the only way the horse can communicate with us. They're doing something as a response to what's going on around them. And when we take that in, it's telling us how they're feeling about it in any given moment. Horses become chronically nasty or stubborn or any of those other negative labels when they're not being heard, when no one's listening. And those behaviors escalate until they get their point across. Or whatever is causing them to feel pain, fear, or anxiety goes away. So, behavior is a response to a stimulus, like that darn plastic bag. It's the way an animal or a person, because we're all the same. When I'm talking about behavior here, it relates to us exactly the same as it relates to the horse. It could be the plastic bag or something new in the environment, because we know horses are creatures of habit and familiarity. But some horses aren't bothered by that plastic bag. They might be more curious about it. And just like us, horses are born with different levels of tolerance, of confidence, of curiosity, of fear. Some are born more serious or more fearful or more playful. They're really not that different to us in that sense. Behavior also happens in relation to an anticipation of pleasure. One horse I know always comes to the gate when he sees his owner's car come up the driveway, because consistently, every time that woman arrives, she goes to the gate, her horse gets a carrot, she spends time just hanging out with him, just grooming him, maybe hand grazing him. It's not all about go get him, bring him in, get him tacked up, and go for a ride. So, based on his behavior, he enjoys her company. He enjoys that experience. Another horse I work with, he's an older quarter horse, he's a little stiff, so we like to do carrot stretches with him after every ride. And we noticed after a while that as soon as we had his tack off and he wasn't on the cross ties, he started to do the stretches all on his own and look at us for the carrot. And his preference seemed to be the one going down between his front legs. So either that was the easiest or that one felt the best, but that's the one he consistently did on his own. Now, it can be a negative behavior too. How many people have horses that paw or bang their stall doors at feeding time or when it's time to go out in the morning, or do the same thing at the gate to come in at night? It's an anticipation of something pleasurable, but it's not particularly a habit or a behavior we want them to be doing. And once that behavior keeps getting reinforced, because the horse gets fed, or gets taken out of his stall, or gets brought in from the paddock, it becomes a learned behavior, and it's harder to unlearn or unteach that behavior than it is to not have it start in the first place. So if you're dealing with that type of behavior, yelling, how well is yelling at your horse or banging the stall door, whatever you've been doing for years? Does it work? No. Maybe it makes you feel a little better because you're doing something. But here's the real key. And it takes patience and consistency and timing. You only want to offer the reinforcement when the horse has all 4 feet on the ground. Because if all 4 feet are on the ground, he can't be kicking the door. Now, try it. It's tricky. But you don't open the stall door, or you don't offer any food until the horse is not kicking. So you might have a split second where you could reinforce that. And that's where you start. And if you do that consistently enough over a period of time, and then never reinforcing the behavior you don't want, soon you'll have a horse who's not kicking at the door. So there's something for you to try. So basically in that, what you're doing is telling the horse what you want him to do, not what you don't want him to do. And honestly, how much time are we spending telling our horses, stop it, don't do that? Okay? So it's just changing your focus a little bit. Now, most of the behaviors we don't want come from some anticipation of something negative, like pain or stress or fear. And pain is not just physical, it's emotional as well. So that can come from some form of confusion, some level of confusion, or miscommunication between us and our horses. But the end result is some level of tension or fear. And the horse feels threatened or unsafe in some way. So in a nutshell, these are the three main causes of what we often label as bad behavior. Fear, where the horse is feeling unsafe or threatened in some way. Pain, real pain, mental or physical, or a fear or an expectation of pain. So in my situation with Dooley, the bucking, explosive bucking, was because he had PSSM, which at the time I'd never heard of and wasn't really well known as far as I know. But it's a muscle disorder that basically has the horse tying up. And then the third is miscommunication, which causes the confusion, anxiety, and tension. And although we may think we have some Zen-like connection with our horses mentally, they read our body language. And we are confusing the heck out of them just by how we move and when we move, and we're not even aware of what we're doing most of the time with our own bodies. So fear is the one I'm going to focus on to start with. And there's actually 5 reflexive responses to fear. How many people know 5 Fs? You're familiar with the flight and fight. We all know those because horses and us, if I were to, scare you, your reaction is either going to be to run away quickly or to stand your ground and fight me, depending on what you've experienced in life. So the horse generally is going to pick flight because they want to put distance between themselves and whatever they feel is threatening their safety. So when your horse is spooking or trying to run away at the sight of that flapping bag or the sound of a flapping bag, or your tied horse pulls back and fights the end of the lead, or you're leading your horse to the trailer and he pulls back and bolts away. Now, for domestic horses, flight is not always an option because they're tied up or they're in a small space, like a round pen or a stall, so they really don't have anywhere to go. And so they'll go into fight mode and use the behaviors that we then label as aggressive or try to be dominant or bossy or whatever. So striking, biting, kicking, rearing, barging, they're all ways of a horse defending himself. So becoming a bucking bronco, a la Dooley, biting or kicking when the girth gets done up, or barging over the veterinarian when she comes in with the needle. If the horse is cornered, I saw a video of this recently on YouTube where somebody put their young child in a very small pen with a wild horse. Yeah, someone said they saw that one. Yeah. Well, what do you think happened? The kid keeps trying to touch the horse. This horse has nowhere to go. The horse kicks the kid. Video ends. So, but that horse really thought he's fighting for his life. So, those are the 2 you know. You probably know this one too. Freeze. And what do we call this one? Frustrating, yes. Stubborn, yep. Lazy, just trying to get out of work. But it's a reflex. There's actually something going on in the brain that causes the horse to freeze. He's not being lazy, disobedient, or unwilling. So you might see this in 2 different ways. One is the horse stops with his head up high and he's sort of staring off into space like a deer in the headlights. And he's probably looking off into the distance at something that maybe he might need to run away from. Or he might freeze in place with a low head and maybe have a sad or defeated look. But it's the same thing. The horse that's standing there with the low head might be mistaken for being either calm and relaxed or being stubborn and disobedient. So the person carries on with whatever they're trying to get the horse to do, and that's when, boom, out of nowhere, your horse explodes. And with the trailering thing here, I'm not surprised when a horse does this. I'm more surprised when a horse willingly goes on one of those caves on wheels that transports him to God knows where, to be with a bunch of strange people and unfamiliar horses in a strange environment. This is a much more natural behavior for a horse, in my opinion. And in another example, you might be putting a saddle on a young horse or an unstarted horse who seems calm and then all of a sudden blows up. So I had a situation like that at a clinic where a young woman brought her young green draft horse and was frustrated with this lazy and stubborn mare of hers who did groundwork quite willingly but wouldn't go forward under saddle for some reason. But I quickly found the problem when I looked at her saddle and discovered that if you put your fingers between the points of the tree and the shoulder, it pinched your fingers. The saddle was far too narrow, and this bad horse just said, that hurts, I'm not going forward. How many people have a horse who would have just gone rearing or bucking or something? So the bad horse, in my books, is a good horse. She said, that hurts, I'm not going to move. So if your horse is not doing something you want them to do, dig deeper and look for a real reason. Anyway, what's going on with this freeze reflex is there's actually a chemical being released in the brain that causes the horse to freeze. He really can't move. So the best thing you can do in that instance is try to gently move your horse away from whatever's straight in front of him. So here's some keys to recognizing some subtle body language cues that we often miss if your horse, so you can tell if your horse is calm and relaxed or in a freeze state. So if you look at that eye, can you see there's a little tent on the upper lid, that little peak? And you can see just a teeny little bit of white there, but you don't necessarily see the white, but if you see that tented lid, that's a sign your horse is worried about something. And rather than just continuing on, you might need to take some steps to help relax him. The eye, he might not be blinking, is another one. And he might be holding his breath. So if you look at his rib cage or even further back to the flank and you see nothing moving, your horse is either breathing very shallowly or he's holding his breath and it's like, right? And if you look at the mouth and the muzzle and the nostrils, you'll see the pinched nostril there, the tight mouth. You might even see, and you'll see it in a picture further along where the upper lip kind of sticks out like this. And that's, again, just some subtle signs that the horse is tense and maybe you need to be stepping away from what you're doing and helping the horse to relax. And this is a case of, couldn't find the right picture I wanted, so you just throw in a kitten picture. Who's fidgeting and fooling around just because he's a kitten. And this is the one that often ends up with our horses being on the video going around social media, where the horse is standing, bobbing his head as somebody's dancing in front of the stall, or the horse who likes to grab everything that's in front of him. And that, if you have a dog, my dog does this, they're great at using this, dogs. So you try to groom my dog, and she either tries to take the brush out of your hand like she's playing, or she rolls all over the place, so you can't brush her. And we do it as well. All animals use this. It's a displacement behavior that takes the focus off one situation and puts it on another. So it's a coping mechanism. It's a way of showing concern without using any of those previous forms of fear. So if your horse is the type who grabs the lead line all the time or the reins, who crowds or pushes into your space, who gets really interested in something down there when you're trying to put his bridle on him, he's trying to avoid the situation. And he's uncomfortable with something. So again, you got to pay attention to that and try and do something that will help him feel more comfortable and safe. But recognize that behavior is not the horse being silly or a clown. He's telling you he's uncomfortable, and he's not going to fight, flight, or freeze. So my paint gelding ever was born like that. Every time, just from a little wee foal, everything went into his mouth. He was very oral, and we all just assumed, oh, that's part of his character, isn't he a clown? But I eventually noticed that those oral behaviors became more pronounced when he was feeling stressed or insecure. So I learned to pay closer attention and take the time to work with him and help him feel more comfortable with the situation, to slow things down or to go back to basics. Your horse is not trying to be alpha or dominant or a clown. He's not bored when he's doing those behaviors, right? He's coping with something he's uncomfortable with. So the next time you notice your horse fidgeting or fooling around, excuse me, pay attention to what you're doing, what's going on in the environment around him, and change it up somehow. Change one thing. Change what you're doing or stop what you're doing. Do it a little differently, or move your horse to a different location and see if the behavior stops so you can figure out what's triggering it. When you can look at it as almost a game and you can figure out what the motivation is for the behavior, you can stop it. And the last one of the 5 Fs, one too far. I don't know if this is going to work. It's a little video of fainting. Has anyone ever seen a horse faint? It's very rare. I had it once many years ago when a horse would get girthed up. She would actually fall down in the aisle, and people just thought, oh, she didn't want to be worked. Knowing what I know now, the knowledge I didn't have 20 years ago, was she might have had something like a subluxated rib, that when the girth got done up, it really hurt. So this is a really extreme one, and in the wild, animals being pursued by predators sometimes just lie down and give up because they don't see a way out. And so that's kind of sad if you ever have a horse that's behaving that way. And I don't know how to play this video. Let me give it a shot. Well, I use this. Oh. So if you watch this horse, if this video plays, you can see there's a lot of agitation. His tail is really ringing. His ears are back. He can't go forward. There's a lot of tension in that body. And then, boom, he goes down. Now, the trick is, can I stop this video? Because we don't need to go through the whole thing.
I got the lights down just as it stopped.
Oh, do you want me to just try it again?
Sorry.
It's just a little... There, you see that better. I know it's a little bit dark.
It's hard to get the lights perfect.
Yeah.
Ray's doing a great job.
And he just goes, no, I can't do that anymore.
Wow.
But if you can find this, I'll maybe see if I can find the link to that video and share it, because you can see more of what the guy is actually doing up there. But that's obviously a horse who's extremely stressed and tense at a public venue and just goes down. Now the trick is, can I get to my next? How do we get out of here now? Oh, I think I have to do that. There we go. Ha ha. Technology. Okay, so we've looked at pain and fear as two of the main causes of behavioral problems. And the third one is miscommunication that's going on more than we realize. Because, as I said, horses are experts at reading body language, and we're not so good. And their body language is a little bit different than ours, and they're also very good at reading our energy, like our physical energy, right? So how you approach your horse, if you've had a bad day at work, you're annoyed at your spouse, and you walk up to your horse is going to respond to like, oh my God, what did I do, right? Because they just pick up on everything. And that's because in the wild, they live beside these things that eat them. And they need to know, when is that lion hunting and when is that lion resting? Because if the zebra is constantly running, assuming the lion might be hunting, they're going to be exhausted and they're going to be dead either from starvation or because they're tired and the lion caught them. So as well as these zebra can read that lioness there, our horses have the same ability. And unfortunately, we don't. We miss those subtle signs that I showed you earlier, which is the horse's whispers, and we miss the whispers. We get the shouts. So horses behave badly, doing things we don't want them to be doing, when they have some level of stress, anxiety, pain, or fear, and they don't feel safe. And the more often they don't feel safe, the more generally anxious they're going to be. So can you imagine if maybe you know somebody like this, who's always worried about something, the sky is going to fall, if whatever, and it doesn't take much to trigger that person. It's the same with the horse. So if our horse has some level of tension when we get on to ride, we're going to be dealing with that. So let's get into some examples of miscommunication. This is my lovely little quarter horse mare, Cheyenne. And I'm going to call the woman that's on the other end of the lead rope there, Sally. Now, some people might call Cheyenne being disrespectful because she's kind of pushing into Sally's space and she's pulling away from Sally. And it's not particularly safe for Sally because if Cheyenne scoots forward, she's going to take Sally out, basically. And then Sally might respond by yelling or hitting or giving a good yank on that rope because now she's been triggered too and she's afraid. So Cheyenne's posture there with the head up and pulling away from the person, she's sort of thinking about leaving and she's in a stress posture. But why is she like that? If you look at the hip angle of Sally's right hip, and Cheyenne is here, and Sally is pushing into Cheyenne's space there, right around her head and neck, and all Cheyenne is doing is, Now if you put a horse where Sally is, with the hind quarter into Cheyenne's face, took away the lead rope, then Cheyenne has the option to leave or to turn and bite the horse's butt. And some horses will do that to people. So who's being disrespectful? The horse can only interpret our body language in the way they interpret the horse's body language. So look at that. Big change. Now we'd say Cheyenne's being respectful. But it's Sally who's being respectful, and all she's done is change that hip. So now she's allowing Cheyenne to bend around her, to bring her head down, to feel relaxed, to feel safe, not feeling threatened. And if something were to startle Cheyenne, she needed to move forward, she's going to go around Sally, not over top of her. So it's safer for both of them. So just a little shift, that's communication. Miscommunication on the right, or your left, sorry, and better communication on the other side. So how do we apply all this understanding of behavior with your horse? I'm going to take you through just some sort of common examples. Tying up is often a problem people have with their horses. They paw, they fidget, they pull back. So which of the 5 F's of fear is going on here? Fight, flight, freeze. Pardon me? You said it. It's trying to get away. It's flight. It's need to move. And she's in a posture with that head up again that shows stress and tension. She's got scissored feet. That's a sign that a horse needs to move. See the front feet are separated, like she's ready to run. And the longer she stays in this position, feeling uncomfortable and having pressure on the top of her pole there, the more it's being reinforced that this is a bad thing. It's going to be a negative experience for her. So the more she's going to not want to be tied up. So how do we change this? First of all, untie her. Now, a lot of people would say, well, you're letting the horse win. Just let her fight it out. Well, as I already said, then you've already taught the horse that, that's not a good thing. And if they do stop fighting it, if they haven't hurt themselves in some way, what you've really got is learned helplessness, is the horse just gives up. So you haven't really done anything to benefit your relationship with that horse in doing that. So don't let her keep fighting. So you untie her, and then you go through the basics. You break it down into the smallest, tiniest pieces. What does the horse need to be able to accept in order to be tied up? What's the first thing? They need to feel safe. So you want to do it in a place where they're not stressed. What's the next thing the horse needs to learn to do? Sorry? Trust. But there's a behavior the horse needs to give us. They need to accept contact, that little bit of pressure on the halter, a little bit of pressure. And so we have to break it down into those smallest basics. She needs to learn that when there's a little bit of pressure, she steps forward to release it rather than pulling back. So we look for break it down into the smallest pieces and start with each step and reinforce or tell the horse when she's doing something right, not getting after her for doing something wrong. So here's a horse I've worked with, an Arabian mare called Babe, who you can see is not exactly happy about having that girth done up. And while she's on the cross ties, she can't bite anybody, but if the cross ties weren't there, she would be. So she'd had this behavior for a while when I met her, and people were just kind of rushing through, getting the saddle on real quick, getting it done up real tight, and the behavior was just getting worse. And so we looked a little deeper into it and discovered that she actually had ulcers. Now, ulcers don't cause just gut pain, they can cause back pain as well. So for this poor mare, being saddled up caused pain, and being ridden caused pain. So as soon as she saw that saddle coming out, and actually it got to the point where just being on the cross ties would bring out this behavior. So first step, diagnose. What's the cause? Ulcers. Always eliminate something physical. Dealt with the ulcers. Once the ulcers were dealt with, then we could start on the retraining, which again was breaking things down to the smallest steps and reinforcing her for not making a face, for not pinning her ears back, for being able to stand quietly. And that might start with, the horses where that third row gentleman is, and I'm here with the saddle, and somebody's there ready to reinforce her for not pulling a face just because the saddle was here. It's always harder to unteach than to start from fresh. But if we don't address the horse's tension, there she was when we had worked through it. And again, that nice, respectful posture. And I'm actually able to touch her girth line there, which I hadn't been able to do without her having that behavior earlier. So if we don't deal with these things on the ground from the very basics, just when we're handling and grooming and tacking up our horses, then we're getting on a horse who's already stressed. And they're tense and anxious, and they react from instinct. They can't think. And frankly, neither can we. So, and they can't perform at their best. So you're doing yourself and your horse a favor when you start this right from the very beginning of going out to get your horse, and when they're in their stall, if you keep them in. So here's some problems under saddle. Now, I didn't work with this horse. This is actually off the internet. It was a Facebook post somebody had put up looking for help with this horse who goes with a high head and leans on the tie down. And if they took the tie down off, she'd lean on the reins. And she'd bob her head all the time, and she was very difficult to control. So you can see that this horse is tense. right? She's not using her core. She's not lifting her back. She's got this lovely U-neck from pulling herself forward rather than engaging her hindquarters. So this horse is in a constant state of stress and probably pain, mental and physical stress. She can't possibly do any better than what she's doing until these problems are addressed. And what I would do with a horse like this is we'd go back to groundwork. We wouldn't be riding her. She'd be getting seen by a body worker, massage therapist, chiropractor, and we'd be addressing does the saddle fit? Are her teeth okay? Are there any issues in her mouth? Does she have any chiropractic issues? Does she have ulcers? All sorts of things to eliminate physical sources, and if she's been going like this for some time, she's going to have some physical stuff going on. So again, this is not the same mare. This is my little mare Cheyenne again, who's also a little quarter horse. But when I got Cheyenne, she sort of went like that other mare, and she had severe separation anxiety. But you can see the difference in how she's carrying herself. Her core is engaged. Her back is more level. And she's got that nice round top of the neck instead of the U-neck underneath because she's driving herself forward off her hind end. And you can also see, when you put them side by side, if you look at the steps, Cheyenne's got a much better reach with her shoulder as well as her hindquarter. And that was all done without gadgets, just time, good groundwork, and reinforcing building the muscles that that mare needed and taking the time she needed to undo the way she had learned to carry herself previously. And you can also see, if you look at the tail, how tight the little horse on your left is, and the nice curl in Cheyenne's tail, so nice soft back end. Boop, 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 all my little arrows, go away. So another problem under saddle. This is actually my paint horse's half-sister. And she is clearly not happy. Everyone agree? So if you look at her nose to tail, you can see all the signs that she's not happy. She's got the flared nostrils. She's got the tight, open mouth, and this is the one where that upper lip is kind of pushed out in front. Her eyes are kind of closed a little bit. She's got that angry eye. And her ears are pinned back, and that tail was flicking like mad. But the woman riding her continued to push her forward into the canter, and the mare is off balance as well. Part of the reason she's not happy. So she pushed her forward into that. That's such a good picture. So you can see that if we can carried on the way things were, that both the mare and the rider are going to end up anticipating badly, having negative expectations about cantering. There's going to be a lot of tension, and that bad behavior is just going to get worse. So again, we need to go back to basics. And the first thing we need to do is get the horse feeling safe and calm and relaxed. First at the walk, then at the trot. And we need to improve her straightness and her balance and her suppleness before we even think about introducing canter transitions. And I mean transitions, not canter. Just thinking about going from trot to canter. That's how small we would need to break this down to deal with her anticipation of that bad thing going to happen and to stop any stress creeping in. So, what I hope you take away from this presentation is that changing how your horse feels, that making them feel safe, is the most important step and the first step in changing their behavior and building a true positive partnership with them. Yes, there are other ways to train, but this is the way I know that really builds that partnership. You can resolve and even prevent unwanted behaviors by seeing your horse's behavior as his communication rather than labeling it. By looking for the root cause to dig deeper and get rid of what's behind that behavior, what's triggering it. You don't need to dominate your horse, you don't need to be his alpha, and you don't need to show him who's boss. If you want to build a relationship with a closer and deeper connection with your horse, you don't want to be a bully. We want our horses to understand us, and we want to understand our horses. So when you train without punishment or force, your horse learns not to expect pain from you. When you're consistent with that, they will always feel safe. And that's what builds 100% trust. You and your horse will begin to communicate on a completely different level, and that's where the true joy of horsemanship really lies. Thank you.
I just wanted to say it's really nice to hear someone taking the blame off the animals. We do this so much with dogs and other animals. We're always blaming them for their behaviors, and there's always a darn good reason for their behavior.
There is.
Anyone have a question?
There's one down here.
Or whoops.
Okay, so I have a 4-year-old who I thought came into the world curious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he mucks in everything. But I never really thought of it as a negative behavior. Like, is there a positive side to a curious horse? He's just literally curious. Because I've bred him and have raised him. Nobody has done anything to him. But he just wants to play in everything. And I never really thought
Well,
of
give
it.
me an example of what he's doing when you say he's being curious.
Curious.
Because curious is a label.
Right.
What's he specifically doing? What's the behavior? What's
Well,
the activity?
Like, if there was stuff laid out, like if say your purse or a bag or your coat or anything, he has to sniff it and touch it. Like, that's a good thing, right? He's not doing it doesn't come from a bad place.
Well,
or is it
what
a
are you-
displaced behavior? Is he?
That's my next question.
Yeah.
What's going on at the time that he's checking this stuff out? Are you asking him to do something else? Is there anything going on in the environment?
Yeah.
So you have to pay attention to more than just the horse. We have to take a bigger
Right.
view because they're reacting to us. They're reacting to other things in the environment, whether or not there's other horses there, whether the wind's blowing, what the weather's like. All sorts of things can feed into that.
Mm. So is curious a negative label?
Curious is a label. Whether it's positive or negative is the emotion you attach to it.
Oh, okay.
See, so that's where it gets
So I should be
tricky.
happy that he's curious, and then that makes it a good thing.
Well, it's curious
not-
if you're wanting a horse who's going to have to, go out and check out all sorts of new things, then maybe being curious is a good thing if he's being curious.
Yeah. But if he's just wrecking
But
stuff,
you
that's
work on
different.
changing your thinking so you catch yourself, that's a label. What's he actually doing and what else is going on in the environment? Because curious could be good, it could be bad, depending on what you're wanting the horse to do at the time. If I want him to go over this jump, but he's dragging me over there to check out that bucket, I'm going to think that's not a good thing. Okay, typically. Okay? Thank you.